Okay, so we are still working with the Savitch group on section 3.3, and this is the part 3, talking about for statement, and that's what we're talking about right now. So for statement is another way of doing the loop. So we learn about the while loop, we learn about do while, and this is a new one that we're going to be working on. And we're going to talk about that. So when we were doing while loop, we had our set, check, and change. Remember that? Set, check, change. Now we can put all of them in one line to do the for statement. So for the for, we're going to have a set, we're going to have a check, and we have a change all in one place. So you can see it's almost identical to the while loop, but the danger of running infinite loop is much higher in the while loop than it is in for loop. We can do it, but it's just like, and it's cleaner. So we can kind of see where things go, especially if you have a lot of code and you try to figure out what is the increment, what is the decrement, what do we do in there, or the setting. So it can be a little more difficult. So the choice always is do the for loop first. If you cannot do the for loop, use the while loop. So we're going to talk more about which one to use. So this is the structure of our for loop, and we're going to talk about that a little more. So that's the for loop we're talking about. And remember, because this n plus plus is all by itself, it doesn't matter it's plus plus n or n plus plus. It doesn't matter when increment is by itself. It's pre or post, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to give you one additional one. And we talk a little more about it. So it's going to add 1. So in this case, it's going to use this n and then add 1 to it. If I put plus plus first, it's going to add 1 and then use it. So we practice on those things. So next thing is, remember what we said about set, and then they both have the set. Then we can talk about check. So for while, you check it over there, and for loop, you're going to check it over there. And then change for while loop is at the end of the while loop, and for loop is right there. Okay. So that's what it's talking about. Again, your book is talking about initialization, Boolean expression, and update. I call it set, change, set, check, change. Now, we initialize it to n. One thing that I want you to pay attention to, right here, you're introducing int over here. So this chapter is talking about local variable. Local variable is when you're creating a variable inside the block of code, that variable only going to exist in that area. So for this for loop, when I have an int over here, this means it's going to introduce this n right here. And this n is not the same as something above or below it. And it only exists through this for loop. So we are talking about, let me clean this up. So we have this for loop. Again, it's, oops. Okay, what I wanted is up there. So we do the initialization, Boolean expression update. I'm talking about set, check, change. So we can do the same thing in a while. So you can basically do everything that for loop does through the while. And that's basically this statement. So here, this block of code and this block of code are exactly the same thing. But you can see it's a less coding and it's a little clearer of how to follow it. So when we're talking about set, check, and change, we are, these are each one of them are expression by themselves. So I can set my variable to anything I want. I can check it to whatever I want. And then I am doing something here. So we had n++ to add 1, but it doesn't have to be that only. I can add 2, 3, 5, 10, whatever I want, or subtract. Doesn't matter. Another way of doing the same thing is I am putting it in 0. I'm checking to see it's greater than minus 100 and n equal n minus 7. So I have to be careful because if the last statement is not in line with what we're doing with the check, we can have infinite loop. So if I change this n minus 7 to n plus 7, or if I change n less than negative 100, or the other one, same thing, we can potentially go to no loop versus infinite loop. So same thing that you do with the while loop, but it's less common in for loop. You can put the whole expression in there. So you can say for setting, you can use the POW for the power. So this one says power y to 3, and then for checking to see if it's greater than 2, and then for the last expression, I'm going to do a square root of x and put it back in x. So I'm updating x constantly. So for the problem 8 that we're going to be talking about is you're going to change this n with the denominator. So you're going to be using for loop, and then you're going to be using it. So you have a numerator and you have a denominator. And so basically you're going to use this for loop for your problem 8. So that can be for denominator equal 1, denominator less than or equal whatever number you have that's defined as constant or reading from the user, and denominator plus equal 2. So just like the other ones, if you have one single statement, you do not need braces. If you have more than one statement, you need to have braces. So if we have multiple statements, we're going to be using it that way. Again, initialization, Boolean expression update. For me, set, check, change. So I can put multiple things in there. It doesn't have to be only one thing. So for my initialization, remember, this is just one, it was one statement. I can separate them and I put multiple statement in there. So I can put more than one thing in any of these things. But remember, semicolon is the one that's going to separate them. So I can say number is equal 1, value equal 100. I can say check for number to be greater than 0 or value to be less than 150. I can go down number minus minus and go up with value plus plus. So either one in the middle is going to satisfy, it's going to stop the loop. I'm not suggesting this, but I'm just saying it's available for you to use. So just like a while loop, if you put your extra, so now you can see the difference between a for loop and a while loop. Remember, if you would have put the semicolon at the end of while loop, you would have an infinite loop because it was not doing any change in there. But in here, because it's doing the change over here, it's going to go through this whole thing, and then what's going to do? It's going to print only one hello, because it's going to stay here 10 times on this line. So it's going to stay here for 10 times. Then when it's done with the 10 times, because I have a semicolon here, then it prints the hello. So this hello is going to happen only one time. So we're going to be careful with these things. So when we're doing this, you got to keep in mind that the convention is to have this variable initialization right here. And if you saw what we had before, so there's two ways of doing it. One is to initialize it there, and one is not to initialize it the way that we had it earlier. So you can see that this for loop over here, these for loops are not initialized. So this one has a double in there, so they're initialized, but they're not local variable. So this one has double. These two don't have anything in it. So the difference. When I get to the for loop, there is a possibility that I have this n somewhere else. So there is a chance that n is used for something else that may or may not be continuing it after the for loop. So if, let's say, I was using n for some counter or something outside of here, when I get here, if I don't initialize it, it's going to reset the value of whatever n I had to this, and then at the end of the for loop, it's going to have it as 11. Remember, it's going to stop at 11. Now, if I declare the data type, what's going to happen is going to create a new variable here. So even if I had one before, it's not going to affect it. So this double X is going to be born over here, and it's going to die after this for loop. That means what? This X is not available after the for loop. This N is available after the for loop, but there is a possibility that's overriding something else, somewhere else. So for portability, convention is to use your data type and declare it here inside here. What else we want to talk about? The for loop. So I have an example over here. I have a count for 55. I'm coming down here. I'm going to say int count equal 1, count less than, greater than 10, count plus plus, do something. And then I'm going to be see out my count. So if my count is 55, it's going to come here and it's going to set the count to, okay, so I thought it's going to be 55, but what's happening is overriding this 55 with 1, and then it's going to go up to 10, and it's going to just keep adding 1 to it. The next one is, if I don't put the int in front of the count, that's going to be 55, and this count, so let me go back, let me be sure that we understand this. So I have this count, let me be sure that we understand. I have this count declared as 55. I am doing this count as 1 as a local. So this count is local 1. So this count is going to be 1. It's going to go up to 11. That's where it's going to stop. But when it comes out of the for loop, the count is going to go back to the original one that we had before the for loop. So the count that I have over here is not going to be affected if I declare my variable when I'm initializing. So this count over here and that count over there are not the same thing. They're two different variables that they are called the same. Now, if I don't put the int in there, what's going to happen is I have the count as 55. So original was 55. Now I don't declare it over here. That means what? It's using the same count. Now to start my for loop, I'm setting it to 1. So I change the 55 to 1 and it goes to 11. So what am I doing? If I don't put it here, the variable that I had before is going to be distorted. So now it's going to come out as 11. Again, the difference could be that this count that I'm using over here, the count that I'm using for the for loop, now it's going to be available here. I can print it out. But the one that I was doing previously, that would not be available outside of this for loop. If I had something before, it's available. But this count over here, whatever I have it in for loop, because I declare it, at the end of this, it's not available anymore. It's going to go away. So you've got to keep in mind for that. So that's going to stop